Ken, great to see you. Before we go into the weeds of the deal itself, explain briefly why GKN is so important for the UK economy.
Well, think about its assets. It's one of the few remaining high-tech engineering companies which is still developing with very, very large R&D sort of programs, and of course strategically placed in all sorts of industries which are going to be important going forward. Electric vehicles springs to mind. And of course there is the sort of strategic side for the UK. It is a contributor to production of components for defence planes and other sort of assets like that.
And about 5,000 UK employees, let's
Absolutely,
forget as well.
Sure, sure.
So today we've had the final offer from Melrose. So under the takeover code, they cannot raise their offer again unless a counter bidder emerges.
That's right. So basically now they haven't, there's been no review of the sort of timeline, so we're still on course for that 29th of March end of offer period. And after that, they need to either put up or shut up, to use the sort of phrase, and that means they have to walk away. I think it's like 6 months or something like that. It's very unlikely that we're going to see any sort of change relative to what we've seen today.
Now, 467 pence, that's the headline price according to Melrose. GKN is doubting that because they say, well, that includes the final dividend that we're paying, and also it's based off a higher Melrose share price than is currently the case.
Absolutely. So Melrose, you could say they're not exactly straining themselves. They've raised their offer, but the raised part is entirely in equity. And of course, with the value of their equity falling today by something like 5%, that reduces the sort of the raised part by some 20 pence. So essentially, I think it was, I mean, it looks kind of symbolic, but there's obviously a little bit more value there on the table. They certainly are trying to give the message that they already believe that their offer was pretty much full as it was.
And for people who don't know Melrose, I mean, they've been accused. We had a trade union activist on a couple of weeks ago who said, well, these guys are break-up merchants, break-up activists. Is that fair?
I mean, I think that certainly politically there's a case to be made for that. But on the other hand, you know, I think it is also true that they certainly do invest hugely in the companies that they sort of buy. They invest probably as much as they have paid for purchase prices, but their business model simply wouldn't make sense if they were just buying companies and holding them for a long time, making no changes at all.
I mean, they've made spectacular returns for shareholders,
Absolutely.
we should point out, yes.
Yes.
So what happens next, do you think? Now, already we've had GKN say they're going to break themselves up. So yes. This company is not going to exist in its present form, regardless of who wins.
Indeed. So what happens next is that I think it's we have until the 29th of March for shareholders to decide that they want to go with Melrose's bid or let it lapse, and then of course their attention will move on to the offer from Dana in the US, or sort of agreement, putatively agreed to a sort of merge the driveline assets. But I think what essentially is on the table is reasonably good value jam today for slightly better jam tomorrow. And of course that's, you know, the Dana Incorporated deal depends on US regulators okaying it, and their shareholders are not going to vote on it until the fourth quarter of this year. Right. So it's a long time to wait. Pragmatically, you've got to expect shareholders to really go for what's on the table more closely.
Worth pointing out, of course, a lot of GKN's existing shareholders don't like the Dana deal because they would receive shares in a US company that they may not necessarily be allowed to hold.
Absolutely. So you'll have some institutional investors, some overseas investors, which I think they will be strictly prohibited from being invested in US companies, depending on the sort of remit in terms of articles of association for the institutional investing that they have. They may have to sell up anyway. But really, I think what you have is really two great offers, I think, really on the table right now. One of them has a longer timeline than the other, and one of them is a bit less certain than the other. The Melrose offer, it may, it's arguably undervalues some of the synergy assets that GKN has, but it's on the table right now, and it's there for the taking.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, what people are being asked to decide here is which of the two managements do you prefer? And
yes, indeed.
Whilst the GKN argument is that the Melrose management is pretty untested in aerospace.
Yes, I mean, I think there is that aspect, but they are very well tested in some of the other industries that they're involved in, and their bid certainly has merit in terms of the sort of like the structure of it going forward. There's no doubt that they will run a very, very orderly ship. There's no doubt that they will have the capability to actually invest and also to manage businesses going forward.
And how significant is it, do you think, that Aviva investors have come out in favour of the Melrose bid today?
I think it's quite significant, isn't it? But again, Aviva investors are speaking in their capacity, using their fiduciary duty. All boards have the interest, must have the interests of investors at heart. And that's probably the most important consideration for Aviva investors. It should really be the most important consideration for all management teams, really.